chances are you've come across some fatwood. Hey friends, welcome back. I am Jason Salyer and this is my friend Scruffs, and we're out here looking at pine trees. So here's one. If you go through the woods and you find a stump like this that looks like it's been there for ages and it's not rotting away for whatever reason, chances are you've come across some fatwood and it's preserved by all of that pine resin that's in the wood. And here is my cat Scruffs. You can see how long this is burning, right? I use my small little knife here. You don't need a giant axe or a machete to access this material. I feathered it out just a little bit and lit it up, and it's burning really hot for a long period of time. Of this, the reason that it's good to know what this is and how to identify it is because if you have wet conditions at all, which it pretty much always is around here, it's difficult to dry out your kindling, and you can struggle. It's going to keep going out on you unless you've got something like this that can burn for a significant amount of time and dry out all that wet material. The pine sap itself has a lot of really good properties as well. It's flammable, as is the wet, nasty, sticky pine that comes off of there is really useful to start your fires. It has a lot of antiseptic properties, so if you get a cut and you think it might have a chance of getting infected, you can put it on that cut and you might mitigate some of those chances of infection. Something like this makes a pretty awesome torch as well. If you take several chips of this and you wedge it between a forked stick of some sort or a split stick, you can make yourself a torch that will allow you to see at night. Let's say your batteries have drained out on your flashlight, or if you don't have a flashlight, you're not prepared. This burns for quite a long time. It burns really bright as well. It will really, if you throw like a big bunch of pine knots or something in a fire, or a big chunk of this in your fire, it will really illuminate your camp and light it up bright. Basically nature's natural candle. If your knife has a sharp 90-degree spine on the back of it like this, it makes it easy to process tinders and really easy to turn this fatwood into something that can be ignited with a ferro rod with no problem. Yeah, so easy that was with this tiny little ferro rod. That right there would dry out some wet kindling. Start throwing just random stuff off the ground. If I'm injured, I can't really move around very well. And it's a good idea just to keep some of this stuff in your pack. So if you come across it, just take a chunk like that, throw it in your pack, and have it for next time. Now, I've heard this called all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter what you call it. I've heard it called lighter knot, fatwood, pine knots. Pine knots is a little bit different. This is the stump of the tree. A pine knot, sometimes what you can find, like for example, this tree right here, this down tree behind us, this is a pine tree. And sometimes what you can find is that when it's on the ground, it'll be completely rotted away, and all that will be left is the knots, where all be left is where the branches connected to the main trunk of the tree, and they're preserved because of all that resin. All of that pine sap collects at the base of those branches, and those pine knots burn really good. You can just take a whole bunch of those, collect them up in a bucket or something, and when you need to get your fire going, throw them on. A lot of people have Bushcraft dogs, they have on their videos. A lot of people have, I've even seen goats with packs on them and things. I have a Bushcraft cat. So, just trying to be unique. Come on, cat. So here's the spot where the tree has been damaged. This is Virginia pine, I believe. And it's got this really mushy, it's cold outside, so it's actually a little bit firmer than normal. When it warms up, it'll get softer. But that stuff right there, if you collect even a little bit of that, not only is that good for antiseptic purposes if you've got a cut or something, but this right here would really accelerate your fire, and you could make a torch out of this. I've done a video on that a couple of years back, I think, actually, making a torch just like this out of that pine resin. You form it around a twig, light that on fire. And by the way, this is an Exotech fire sleeve that you put a Bic lighter in. Keeps it completely waterproof. It saves it from the button getting depressed and leaking the fuel out. If you want one of these, I'll have a link in the description. I highly recommend them. All right, so this has been burning for well over a minute now, maybe a couple minutes. and it's still got lots of life left in it. So if you needed some fire, needed some light torch-like device, you just gotta be careful because it does drip. But it burns really hot, really strongly, and that was just a small little marble size chunk of sap. Discovered a couple years ago when I was really struggling with creating a hand drill fire and my hands were destroyed. I discovered that putting some sap on my hands gave me enough traction to be able to apply downward pressure on that spindle. Without that, I was just failing miserably. I couldn't get that coal created, and I was getting these giant big blisters on my hands, and I was at the point of complete failure. It was just going to give up. And the difference in using the sap on my hands could have been the difference between me, freezing to death or not. I hadn't seen that before. I hadn't used that technique before, but it was that desperation of needing to get something done that allowed me to think kind of outside the box. And also that antiseptic properties of the pine sap on my hands was pretty beneficial after those giant big blisters.